What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here in front of me we got a transmission for project CB9. I know we promised we're going to work on the transmission and engine bay aspects, so the day has finally come. So this basically is a used transmission. I'm going to go over the details of the acquisition process and all the different transmissions available for this swap. So we're going to go ahead and show you how to prepare this transmission before it goes onto the engine itself in terms of simple maintenance and some cleanup processes. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. All right, guys, good news. Finally found a transmission. Went ahead and made the purchase this morning. This is down in North Carolina. I got family down there, so I'm gonna make a little pit stop to pick up this transmission. Anyways, decided on a 2002 Honda Accord transmission, which is the final year, which will fit on an H22 engine. And the gear ratio is a little bit longer than that of a typical Honda Prelude H22 transmission. So going back to the transmission codes here with all the gear ratios. So 1997 to 2001 Honda Prelude base, final gear ratio of 4.266. And here is the transmission that I picked up, which is a P2A8, final ratio of 4.062, which is not too far off from a 4.266. So it won't have as strong acceleration like the typical Honda Prelude, but on the other hand, I'll get better gas mileage because the engine won't be screaming at, I don't know, 4,000 RPM at like 65, 70 miles an hour. I think it'll drop it down about 400 to 500 RPMs on the highway. So if you just want to cruise, the longer ratios are better suited. So I wasn't going to be doing stoplight races, 100% of the time. It's just a kind of a spirited driver on this CB9 wagon build. But looking at some prices here, I'll show you what's going on with the Honda Prelude H22 transmission prices. So just did a sorting by the mileage on my favorite website, which is car-part.com. This is basically a auto recycler website which has all kinds of parts for all kinds of vehicles, and you can sort it by make and model and what part you're looking for and what year range and whatnot. And it'll actually give you results based on distance, how far it is from your place, and price, and what part grade it is and whatnot. But so anyways, here is a blue painted transmission. It says it's automatic, and this is from New York, and I try not to buy any cars or parts further north of where I'm at due to the exposure of road salt and rust corrosion and whatnot. But oh man, this Honda Prelude is a big rice bucket. Look at that thing, my God. That poor car. Anyways, this is just what these auto recyclers do, is they take pictures of the car and take pictures of the parts and try and break down the car by parts. And once the car is parted out pretty well, they'll crush them and recycle them and move on to the next ones. But so anyways, going on the prices here, the highest price is basically $2,400. Which is crazy. It's 97,000 miles. I mean, that's low miles, but I mean, $2,400 for one transmission is just absurd. Anyhow, I mean, here's one for $1,000 and 44,000 miles on it, 59,000 miles, 850. But you're just seeing $800 here, $750, $700, $650, down to $500. And here's one for 140,000 miles at $500, which ain't bad. It's down in Texas. Texas got some good prices, but it's a little far for shipping. Gotta keep that in mind. You gotta ship these things on freight, so assume about $200 plus for shipping on these things. They don't really list prices after that, but it's very limited on 1997, 2001 transmissions here. And you can also look at by how far they're away from you, so we'll sort by distance. And so here's one for $775. It's got 120,000 miles on it. This one's up down in North Carolina. Another one's $800. 118,000 miles. So I mean, $400, that's not too bad, but then again, it's got 201,000 miles, so that's gonna need some work probably. Synchros, seals, whatever else it may need. So you gotta keep that in consideration when you're looking for a transmission, how much work you want to put into it. 44,000 miles for $1,400, that's a little pricey, but it just depends what you want to spend and how low of miles you want. So I went with 140,000 miles, which is not too bad, and bought it down in North Carolina, hoping those are highway miles. Don't want to really buy one in New York City or Los Angeles, where it's continuous stop and go traffic. You kind of want to buy a transmission that's known for wide open spaces and a lot of highway driving and whatnot, because the car is just kept in gear and just keeps on going. So this just gives you a quick explanation of the transmission purchase I went through. So anyways, the salvage yard is in the process of removing it from the 2002 Honda Accord, which is where it's coming from, and they will give me a call once it's ready. So I'll go pick it up on the way to visit my family. Looking forward to getting this transmission. That's the big puzzle piece of this car project right now. Honda Accord 5-speed transmission, transported from the small salvage yard in North Carolina where I picked this up. This was $300 plus tax. The junkyard guy was kind enough to include all the mounting bolts that attach this to the engine, because I believe the automatic and manual transmission mounting bolts are different. So I wanted to have all the hardware, so that was nice of him to throw these in the bag for me. This transmission supposedly has about 140,000 miles. It was relatively clean from what I saw, but you know, there's some rusted up brackets right here, so I'm gonna have to add that to the list from the yard. Also, the mounting bracket for the shifter cables are gone. He sold those shifter cables to someone else, so I'll go ahead and add that to the list on the yard. But this transmission looks like it's pretty decent for the price I paid. The slave cylinder will be replaced as well. And this transmission, we're gonna go ahead and power wash this thing so we can clean this up. And obviously you wanna jam some like plastic bags in these axle openings on both sides prior to power washing this thing, because you do not want any water on the inside this transmission. So we'll go ahead and jam some plastic bags in there before we power wash this thing with the pressure washer. So we'll go ahead and get this thing cleaned up and prepped, and then we'll go from there. Okay guys, the moment you've been waiting for. We're finally moving on to the drivetrain aspects on Project CB9. Honda Accord transmission with 130,000 miles on it. This came with a 30-day warranty, but I'm already past that warranty because I've already picked it up a few weeks ago. So I went ahead and picked this transmission up in North Carolina, outside of Raleigh. I found this on carpart.com and spoke with the yard. They seemed like they're very friendly folks, and this thing had a 30-day warranty, so obviously I'm outside that warranty, but this transmission looked like it was in great shape with the pictures he texted me. So I went ahead and picked it up, and also gave my parents a surprise visit, multitasking on that trip. So that was a great visit for North Carolina. Anyhow, we're gonna go ahead and get started on prepping this transmission. Okay, first things first, we need to go ahead and mount the shifter cable bracket in position with these 3 holes. Here's our bracket. It only goes in one way, and these are our 12mm bolts. So I obviously use a 12mm ratchet on this. So let's go ahead and mount this bracket in position. Okay, shifter bracket is officially mounted onto the transmission. Now, please keep in mind that the bolt closest to the front of the car or closest to the reverse wires, that's gonna be shorter than these back two right here. As you can see here on the transmission casing, this is not as deep as these two back here, so this is gonna be the shorter 12mm bolt, and these are a little bit longer. And moving on to the next step, here's the studs that will hold on to the transmission mount. Transmission mount is right here. And the transmission mount I went ahead and chose for this installation is an innovative 75A polyurethane mount. Now there's 2 different types of mounts for this since we're going with a 5-speed conversion. The mounting bracket inside the engine bay would have to be relocated otherwise, but with companies with Innovative and Hasport, they actually make mounts that are a little bit offset to account for the different transmission mount. So that eases the installation and motor swap process. So whether you're building an Accord or a Civic to have a different engine than what was intended from the factory, Passport and Innovative has been helping out customers for years on end. Now let's go ahead and get this installed. So we've got 3 17mm nuts right here. Use a deep 17mm socket in order to do so. So let's go ahead and mount this on the transmission itself. All right guys, in terms of the Innovative automatic to 5-speed conversion mounts, there is 2 different types. This is the tall mount, and this is for 1994 on above transmissions. The transmission casings on these years are actually shorter in height, and also the pin orientation is a lot different. Now, if you're gonna go ahead and use a transmission from a 1990 through 93 Accord, the transmission casing is a little thicker, which in terms has a shorter mount and obviously different pin orientation. So just make sure that you order the correct Innovative mount when ordering these mounts. Just to go ahead and give you guys a heads up as to the different mount systems here. The next step, inside the transmission housing itself, you wanna go ahead and replace this throwout bearing. That throwout bearing is actually connected to this rod, which is then on the outside of the transmission itself, and this is where the slave cylinder mounts. Now, for those that don't know how a manual transmission works, once the slave cylinder is mounted in position, that is then hooked up to the clutch line that was installed to the clutch master cylinder. And once the clutch pedal is pushed, that pushes all the hydraulic fluid into the slave cylinder, thus pushing this rod right here. And as you can see here, it pushes against the clutch itself, which disengages it. So it's basically bad once you're at a traffic light and you're continuously holding on that clutch pedal, because this fluid is just, stuck in position. Not to mention this throwout bearing is doing a lot of work, with the rotating mass and whatnot. So if you're at a traffic light and you're always pressing the clutch pedal, this throwout bearing is doing a lot of work. So I advise when you're at a traffic light, just basically take out of gear and push on your brake pedal and don't rely on your clutch itself. So it'll save your throwout bearing tremendous life amount right there doing so. So let's go ahead and remove this system here. All right, here's the clutch kit for Project CB9. This is an Exedi OEM replacement kit. Now this is the KHC03, which is for a Prelude H22 engine. Now, for whatever reason, if you're gonna put a Prelude transmission onto an Accord engine, you wanna choose an Accord clutch kit. So that's basically the rationale of ordering a clutch kit. Now, here's the contents that we've got. So you got the clutch disc, and you got the main clutch component right there. And then you got your clutch bearing, throwout bearing, you got some grease, alignment tool, and a shim, it looks like. So the only 2 parts that we need right now is this grease and the clutch bearing. And here's all other parts for the engine and whatnot. So we're gonna go ahead and grab the slave cylinder. This is also Exedi. Now, when ordering a slave cylinder, make sure you coordinate that with what transmission you're using. So this is for a 2001 Honda Accord. The Prelude is different in the way it mounts. So I believe this mounts on the top mount, and the Prelude and whatnot mounts on the side. So very important when ordering a slave cylinder. So let's go ahead and take these items and get these installed. Now, in order to remove this old throwout bearing right here, basically you're gonna pivot this thing as much as you can and basically just pull out the old bearing and it should release. So let me go ahead and remove this bearing right here. Okay, clutch release bearing successfully installed. I went ahead and took this little grease right here and made sure I applied it liberally around the actual shaft right here. And then I had some extra, so I rubbed it on the inside of the bearing itself. And then I basically just pulled this backwards, packed it in as best I could, had a little bit of extra, so this thing is gliding real smooth right now, and that's what you want. Now, I found this old clutch material that was packed in right behind this lever right there. And I'll go ahead and show you the clutch that was included with this used transmission. I don't know why the junkyard gave it to me, but it's a sight to see, so I'll go ahead and show you what's going on with that. Okay, here's the clutch disc and the pressure plate that the junkyard gave me. As you can see here on this clutch disc itself, there is no more material left. I mean, this is down to the sheet metal rivets. Okay, this transmission is actually taking shape with all the items we've had to add to it. Now there's one final component, and that is the slave cylinder that mounts right there. So let's go ahead and open it up and show you what prep we need to do for that. All right, here's the contents of the exact slave cylinder. This is the SC868 in case you're using an Accord transmission. You've got the main slave cylinder itself, the main pin, a locking pin, and a rubber seal. Now what's not included is this fitting right here. This fitting was on the old slave cylinder, and that's held in place with a locking pin. If you don't have one, I'm not sure if they sell one aftermarket, but I just took this off an old slave cylinder. Now, in order to get that off, you need this type of punch right here. This is a 3/32 punch. And here is basically where that pin goes into place right here. So you'll basically just punch it out, and this fitting will then come out. So in order to install this, you're gonna wanna take this rubber seal, put this thing right on the end right there, insert this into the top of the slave cylinder, just like so. And then you're gonna drive the locking pin right on the side right here, which is this hole right here. So we're gonna go ahead and put this on the vise and get this assembled. Now we can go ahead and install the assembled slave cylinder onto our transmission itself. These are 12mm, so obviously use a 12mm socket. And make sure that this ball right here goes into the recessed area of this lever and torque to 16 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and do this. All right, this Accord transmission is now fully prepared to go into the car. The only accessory we could not add is the starter And the reason behind that is because there's a bolt that goes all the way through the casing and goes into the block itself. So we'll have to wait until this is actually mounted onto the motor before the starter can go in place. But we've got the slave cylinder in, we've got the transmission mount, and we've got the shifter cable bracket in, along with the new clutch throwout bearing right there. So things are looking good, and I'm pretty happy with the results so far. So things are moving along well in this Project CB9. So let me go ahead and show you how this transmission works for those that don't know how a manual transmission actually functions. Okay guys, the basic principles of how the shifter cables interact with the manual transmission is you've got the shifter cables that mount in position right here. Now this small cable right here is basically gonna be the row selector. Now if I pull this forward, this is basically first and second. So first gear, second gear, I let this lever go. This is third gear, and it's fourth gear. I pull this lever in, that's fifth gear, and it won't let me go into reverse. I believe that there is an electrical connector right here, which won't let this transmission go into reverse, probably for safety reasons. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and obviously reverse is locked out right now. So it's basically the main theory behind how the manual transmission works right here. Relatively simple, yet effective and more fun. Can't wait to get this installed. All right, well, I hope I didn't bore you guys too much at the beginning there with the transmission options and the purchase process, but we were able to lock down a transmission from Project CB9, which is a 2002 Honda Accord 5-speed transmission with 140,000 miles. We were able to change out the clutch throwout bearing, the slave cylinder, add on the transmission polyurethane mount, along with the shifter cable bracket. Now the next step of the process, we need to go ahead and address the engine bay and get that prepared. And then we can finally move along to the H22 preparation and maintenance process. So I hope you guys can follow along for that. If you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Have a great day.